need to understand is the nature of this virus, coronavirus, and how it is going to behave. We've been seeing a lot of mutations happening over the last 2 years. So one needs to understand that these mutations are a way for the virus to survive, and the virus will keep mutating. The only good part we are seeing is that in spite of these mutations happening, the disease severity has significantly gone down. So we are now seeing much less number of people requiring hospitalizations, extremely few people who will get very sick, and deaths have become very uncommon, few cases only. And most of the people are actually having a very mild disease, even many times asymptomatic disease, something which can be fairly well, with a reasonable sort of sense of security, be managed at home. So yes, it is early days, but we do know that BA.2.75 has been first reported from India, and now is increasingly been reported from world over, and 10 countries at least have officially have reported it. I'm sure it is much more rampant than what is being reported. Elsewhere in the world, especially when we talk about Europe and US, it is BA.5 and to some extent BA.4, which is the predominant variant now. But the way things are going, it is likely, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, it is likely that BA.2.75 may actually replace BA.5 going forward. But the good news is that all these variants we are talking about, whether that's .4, .5 or 2.75, all these do not, so far, have not been reported to cause severe illness. And the other common features between these mutants or these variants or sub-lineages is that they have mutations in areas of receptor binding domain of the spike protein of the virus. Now, this is that critical protein of the virus through which it attaches to the human cell. Any mutations in this part of the virus are very critical, because this is what decides how invasive this virus will be into human cells, and thereby it determines the severity. And number two, it also determines whether the previous vaccinations and the previous infections have given you some immunity against these new mutants or new sublineages or not. What we are seeing increasingly is that there is an immune escape phenomena. That means the recent mutant viruses may not be the previous vaccinations and infections may not be giving you enough protection against these present mutants. So that means you may get reinfected. So imagine a person who has had 2 vaccines of COVID and has taken a booster shot. He is at the same risk of getting these infections as a person maybe who's not vaccinated. Similarly, if a person has had infection of COVID in past and has developed protective antibodies, still he's at risk of getting the infections. But does that mean that vaccinations are not effective? No, it is not true. Vaccinations may not prevent you from getting an infection by a new mutant strain, but clearly reduce the severity of your infection. So that to that extent, vaccinations and previous infections give you enough immunity to protect you from getting a severe disease. And plus, there's something else to look forward to, is the next generation vaccines. Right now, the COVID vaccines world over, the ones which we know of, are specifically against the earliest variants of COVID. You know, the Wuhan, the Alpha, and the Delta. I'm sure, and the world is now actually evolving towards that. They are trying to come out with newer vaccines, and we should have those vaccines in very near future, at least in the Western world, where these vaccines will cater specifically against these newer mutants, newer strains. So hopefully you will now have vaccines which develop against BA.2, BA.4 and BA.5. And this is exactly the same story as what happens to the flu vaccine. All of us know that every year we take a flu vaccine at the start of winters or just after monsoon. And why these are annual vaccines and why we have to wait till that time? Because every year the composition of these vaccine changes depending upon what's the most prominent flu virus in that part of the hemisphere and that part of the continent. I think we are in for a similar situation as far as COVID vaccines are concerned. A lot of places we see this strategy of stop and start, that we see a new variant coming up, you suddenly ramp up your strategy of genomic sequencing and testing, and then we see the peak coming down or the numbers coming down, and then we forget the testing, we forget the genomic sequencing. I think that should not be the case. It is absolutely important for every country in the world to continue their genomic surveillance, because these mutants and the lineages and sub-lineages can only be detected when this is an ongoing process. And I think the most critical here is early and timely detection. So like in India, we were able to detect this new lineage. Similarly, there may be 10 other sub-lineages that are coming up in different parts of the world. So, and once we know that there is a new potential sub-lineage or lineage which has come up, a new mutant which has come up, which could have increased transmission, which could have increased immune escape, or more seriously, which could have more human invasion potential, thereby leading to a higher severity disease. So if you are able to detect that early, you can reduce the transmission, because then you can restart the strategy of containment, local containment, rather than going into a national level containment. So early detection of mutations will prevent the transmission of the disease to larger areas and will effectively help in getting the vaccine made fast, so that we can then protect the population in which the new variant has still not come in. So very, very important that we continue to do not only the testing for the COVID virus by either the rapid antigen test at home or the RT-PCR test, which is a gold standard, but at the same time, a small percentage, maybe 5% of the samples at the national reference laboratories to continue to do the genomic surveillance and release that data. So I think for us in our country, the priority is to keep our vulnerable population, ensuring that they get booster doses. The people at higher risk of getting a severe disease are given the booster. And most importantly, we keep understanding the dynamics of virus transmission, that it is still there in the community and it is spreading from people to people. We will no longer ever be in a stage of going into lockdowns, etc. So life, hopefully that way, will be back to what it used to be, but in a new way. So when you go in open, crowded places, when you're sitting in small congested rooms, make sure that you are wearing masks. Make sure that you have social distancing which is maintained, wash your hands frequently, and at the same time try not to be overcrowding a place unless until it is dire requirement of there's a need to do so. So I think if we follow these basic principles, we will slow down the virus transmission, and over the months or maybe years, as the immunity level of the entire population of the globe keeps getting better with these repeated vaccinations and natural infections, overall pandemic gradually will slide into a phase of an endemic type of character.